Welcome everybody to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious today. Today we're going to talk about two Apollo missions 6 years apart. They landed on July 24th, and this is one of the capsules behind them here. As I go over there like that, the last Apollo capsule that orbited the Earth. What is it? Where is it? Dave Stange, you want to guess? Doug Forrest, you might know. Some of my Stay Curious buddies out there, we're so glad that you're with us today to stay curious. And you can chime in, as today kind of a freewheeling show with some structure to it. We're going to talk about Apollo 11, successful mission, landing in the ocean with a bunch of moon rocks, and of course Apollo Soyuz Test Project also landed on the same July 24th, but 6 years apart. And look back at the three astronauts, American astronauts, to the Apollo Soyuz Test Project. Vance Brand is still with us, but sadly we don't have the General Tom Stafford or Deke Slayton with us anymore. But we're going to highlight their lives just a little bit. So stay curious today. Thank you, Logan Cope is our intern from Eastern Florida State College, who's manning the Streamlabs board today, and Marty Winkel, my co-producer for 4 years of this video podcast, is in the building here overseeing Logan's fine work there. So let's kick it off, Logan. We want everyone to keep in your prayers Karan Conklin, who is recovering and having treatment for her lung cancer, but she's been visited frequently by our staff here, and she's in good spirits and just hanging in there. So Karen, we wish you well. Keep your thoughts and prayers with her and her family. Want to also give a plug to Dr. Al Kohler, who was on our show last week on Apollo July 16th, because he was in the firing room when Apollo 11 was launched to the moon, and he wrote this book. It's free, that you could get it for free. Just Google Exploring Space there. You will not regret it, as it is a really cool brief history of Cape Canaveral up to today's events there. So you will download this and you're going to enjoy some great space history from a man who helped make it, Dr. Al Kohler, an important one of the founding members of our museum. And we got a big surprise yesterday. Winston Scott and Roger Crouch, two astronauts, were in our building here. And we're going to do an interview with Winston Scott, which it ended up being with also Roger Crouch. And we will air that hopefully later this week. So look forward to that. A very special day, because Roger Crouch's wife, Anne, had a special presentation for Winston, a Quilts of Valor organization, presented him a quilt, and that was on the program there. So great. We will also feature that on our Facebook page coming up here. So probably maybe Thursday or Friday we'll show this. If we had a few little technical problems, so we got to splice together a couple of the segments of it there, so we'll get it done with our IT guy, Bruce Jacobs. But looking good there, guys, in our museum there, Winston Scott and Roger Crouch, who Roger will be the astronaut of the day out at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex starting on Wednesday, July 24th, and out there for 4 or 5 days till Saturday. So catch him out there. Great talk. He was 83 and 94, the two missions that were repeated up there in space for a space lab. So we enjoyed having them in the building, and you'll see more about that on Facebook, and stay curious. And tomorrow, quite interesting to have James Hines, he's the head executive of Airbus U.S. Space and Defense. So you're going to want to hear the OneWeb to Airbus story and how national security is tied into that. So I'm getting up my smart tablet here to see if I can pick up us live on here. Let's see, there we go. Don't see anybody live. That's not coming up yet, so it probably will when it recycles there. And I can take your questions, but you're going to have questions for James Hines. OneWeb was a big company that has merged and been bought out, and now is a part of Airbus, one of the largest builders of aviation aircraft as well as satellites in the world. So let me go there. I don't see this popped up here yet. Don't know how long that, sometimes it takes a couple minutes to come up there, so I could take your questions, and I'll be looking for that. So let's get kicked off here with the story of the day, where we're talking about the Apollo 11 astronauts of Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins coming back to Earth. Here's a panorama of what they had going on up there. And I'm not showing this up here, so we're live, right? You got some people talking?
Go back and reopen the page.
Reopen? All right. Having Logan help me out here. There we are. Okay, Logan, that works there. So I just had to reboot the thing. And there we are, so I can pay attention to you up there watching our program today, Gary Gerald. And we've got Mitch Rothman's watching with Man Space. Robert Laws up in Dundee, Scotland. Mitch, you're in Colorado. Beautiful day probably to be there. Dave Stangy's got the answer to where, from Michigan, where this is Apollo command module is there. We'll spring that on you in a minute. And hello to Steve Jokums. He said, greetings to Marty, Logan, and all the Stay Curious gang from Lake County Spaceport on Fox Lake, and our best wishes for Karen's recovery as we're all helping that. And Tom Celentano says, Roger Crouch is so nice. Met him a couple times after seeing the STS-83 launch. He is a great guy. And his wife, Ann, is also super. And you're going to enjoy that program that we're going to bring to you that we recorded with Winston and Roger. It was a curveball thrown to me because I didn't know Roger was coming in the building, but we just went along with it like I usually do and had a big time. So the panorama of Apollo 11. Those are two kind of rare photos seen of Neil and Buzz in the lunar module on the surface. Of course, the walk down the ladder off my shoulder. Marty, people say, of course, Buzz didn't take any pictures of Neil Armstrong when he was handed the camera, except one at the Mesa or something back part there. But hey, guess what? Neil took a picture of his boot that's immortalized in space history, because that is Neil Armstrong's boot print on the moon. And of course, he's in the visor, the famous shot of Buzz. All of this, when they landed July 24th, 1969, we were not going to see these pictures for days, maybe even a week on there. There's the splash down the Pacific Ocean with the I think they had 54 pounds of lunar rock and soil in the box there. And always a cool picture of them being put in the bio lab outfits there, the scorched Apollo 11 command module Columbia that Mike Collins said flew so beautifully just without a hitch. And again, it was flawless till the end, with the last one being flown on Apollo Soyuz Test Project. There's the astronauts in their garb. And Marty, and particularly Logan, being a young man, I thought it was so silly that they would go through this. Moon germs, a germ affected everybody on Earth all at once. I mean, that's preposterous, all right? And then we all lived through the COVID pandemic. Those of us that did live through it, because it also took the lives of several of my friends, just like yours, unexpectedly. But the COVID pandemic was something that taught us a lesson about being on Earth and how fragile our ecosystem can be, our whole environmental biosystem. Little panorama of what the guys went through. They went into a Airstream trailer. If you've owned an Airstream trailer out there and spent some time in it, that's what they were in. Here they are, Neil reading the paper. Of course, papers were huge back in the day, and very tight quarters in there. They have a replica of it at Johnson Space Center in Houston, and they have a Scrabble board laid out there. I thought, well, that's of course logical, and a couple papers with crossword puzzles worked in them. I think it was a 28-day quarantine. And then they went on a world tour for 40 days. All right. This was an incredible amount of stress after the mission that they went through. Their families, the wives, some of the kids went around the world. I don't know how many countries, something like crazy 40 countries in 40 days. But they really did a goodwill tour at the urging of President Richard Nixon to show the world that we did this for all mankind and not just America. So we love it. There is the Apollo 11 capsule at the Smithsonian. When you see these capsules, like I frequently see Apollo 14 out at the Saturn V Center of Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex, I'm amazed at the crampedness of it. But these astronauts that flew in the Gemini and were basically in their seats the whole time, they had a lot of room to move around there. And then Mike Collins, he had it all to himself for about almost 2 days orbiting the moon by himself. What I wanted to show is the interior. You know, I admit I do neglect the command module and its incredible flight worthiness. Here's the control panels in it. Why do I ignore the command module of North American who built it? Because I don't have any North American volunteers around here, or many North American people at all come to our museum, because they're in California. But we got Marty Winkel here, and boy, was Marty's program that wasn't featuring him except off air talking about the lunar module LM tail number 5. We had over 400 views of that program. So thank you all for watching that program. I'm glad that you found that informative. And share and like and tell people about our video podcast. I know you all are. But what was interesting why I put this in here is because it was really about 5 or 6 years ago that they found written in the Smithsonian model when they were putting it through a refurb. This is Michael Collins wrote on there, spacecraft 107, alias Apollo 11, alias Columbia, the best ship to come down the line. God bless her. Michael Collins, command module pilot. They didn't know this was in there for like 40 years and then discover a Sharpie that Mike Collins put in there to attribute to his spaceship there. So I think that's pretty cool. And that's why you watch Stay Curious, to get these little nuggets of knowledge out there. Well, of course, our partner, Chris Calley, I call him partner. He's done a lot for our museum in a quick time. His father, Paul Calley, did this stamp, the iconic stamp, First Man on the Moon. They actually took the plates to do this in the lunar module. So not only significant the image, but all of the stamps made off of one of the plates went to the moon and back. How cool is that? And then Chris Calley and his father, Paul Calley, who passed away about 12 years ago, at the certain anniversaries, they combined to do this together as father and son. And then I think Chris did this on himself on an anniversary of a airmail stamp back then. So we love touting the art. All of these stamps are so meaningful in the history of NASA. There you have a double stamp. Robert McCall did the Apollo Soyuz stamp in 1975. And a beautiful, it wasn't a double stamp. I take that back. It's two different stamps there. And then there you see the Calley stamps up at top. And of course, they did a 50th anniversary First Man stamp on the moon there with the iconic visor shot, we call it. The U.S. Postal Service always doing a good job keeping our space accomplishments in the forefront of the American people, whether they mail letters or not. I mailed a few packages, but I can't remember the last time I mailed a letter, Marty. So have to think hard on that. There is the double stamp, Robert McCall's work of that. This is so historic. Okay, 6 years after the Apollo spaceflight, we can maybe say that the legacy of the Apollo-Soyuz Test Project continues today on the International Space Station with the 3 Russians and 6 Americans up there in harmony. But what can we say about Apollo? 50 years later, the legacy's never been continued. There's never yet to be a spacecraft like the lunar module designed to work in the vacuum of space, all right, with the operators standing up, and this vehicle not designed to return to Earth, instead designed to land and take off an alien world. Has not been duplicated yet in the crewed version, okay, in over half a century. We're waiting for that. SpaceX and Blue Origin and all you other companies out there. We know some uncrewed spacecraft have done it, but still, it's amazing that half a century's gone by and it's never been done again. That's why we celebrate it. So the Apollo-Soyuz Test Project in 1975. You know I'm going to reach for my mission patch book here, and let's just see what the comments are made about how this was put together, this piece of artwork here. Let me put my spectacles on. The emblem has the words Apollo in English and Soyuz in Russian around a center disk, which depicts the two spacecraft docked together in Earth orbit. The bright sun and blue and white Earth are in the background. The white stars on the blue background represent American astronauts, and the dark gold stars on the red background represent the Soviet cosmonauts. The patch was a composite of ideas and was first designed by Gene Pinatero of North American Rockwell, and the final artwork was created by NASA artist Stan Jacobson. So I didn't know who the artists were involved in that, but of course launched on July 15th, 1975, and landed July 24th, 1975 at 4 in the afternoon. And we're going to talk about Tom Stafford, Commander Vance Brand, and Deke Slayton, Donald Slayton, as it were, and of course Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov were the Soviet cosmonauts, and they have both passed away. So only Vance Brand, who is, how old is Brand is 93 years old, is alive to talk about it today. So Tom UCX says hi, and Carlton Bailey points out, yes, what killed the Martians on Earth in War of the Worlds? Germs. All right, so thank you, Logan. Thank you, Carlton. He said, give Logan hugs. No, he's saying give hugs and prayers for Karan there. So, and good afternoon, Tom UCX. Glad that you're watching today. Anytime you guys want to correct my faux pas here, please do. So, let's see here. We had a wild day yesterday for sure with that surprise visit by Roger Crouch with his wife, and you're going to see a great program that we put together that very soon. We'll tell you when. So here are the cosmonauts and astronauts there, the launch of the Apollo-Soyuz Test Project, Saturn 1B there. The history of this is well known, of course. Vance Brand and Deke Slayton were the 77th and 78th persons to go to space. The two cosmonauts had already flown before. Of course, Alexei Leonov, the first human to do a spacewalk, and lucky to survive that. This was after 1975. Okay, I mentioned the 77th, 78th person. Okay, after 1975, we have 617 humans orbited the Earth. That's 85% of the total. Only 15% of humans that have orbited the Earth today orbited in 1975 or earlier. All right. And after 75, over 85% of everyone that's gone to space is gone. So interesting little factoid there. Of course, the handshake in space there between Leonov and the general, Tom Stafford, poorly photographed. The flash should have been working there and didn't. But that's the actual first handshake between a Russian and an American in space 49 years ago. And today, they are working together in space, but were not working together on the ground very well. So this is the way it looked up there. The docking module that is attached to the command module of the Apollo was something that the Americans built and to the specifications of the Russians. And this is something we're going to see a picture of that pioneered us going to the Mir space station in 1999 for the first time. Deke Slayton's over there on the left. Where did he get the nickname Deke? We'll tell you about that in a second. And there's the landing on parachutes in the Pacific Ocean. We have in our museums several artifacts commemorating the Apollo Soyuz Test Project 49 years ago, including this poster signed by everybody but Deke Slayton. He didn't get to sign that there. You got Tom Stafford up at the top, Vance Brandt at the bottom, Leonov, his signature, and Kubasov at the bottom. But we still cherish it. And here's what the contraption looked like. This is actually in the Smithsonian. The Cosmosphere in Kansas also has a full-scale replica that's quite impressive. It's kind of in a back room, so to speak, against the wall. This is such well displayed, but the Soyuz spacecraft here, very interesting. Both the Apollo and the Soyuz have a trunk on the back, a service module that is jettisoned and doesn't come back. The cosmonauts are actually launch and land in this middle section here, and the bulbous part is a ingenious idea for the Soviets to create an extra room for the cosmonauts on their Soyuz spacecraft to work and even sleep and get away from each other. We did not have that on our Apollo command module, which is there you see the service structure on the back would be burned up in the atmosphere, and looks a lot like the Boeing Starliner up there, of course, a basic principle. But this tried and true Soyuz spacecraft still is the way it is today, though it was first launched in 1971, where a cosmonaut was killed. Here's the important docking hatch. You go, well, what's that picture all about, Mark? This is about history. This is about Russia actually capturing an American spacecraft in space. I think the Apollo was the active and passive was the Soyuz when they docked. But this is the design that they took to the Mir and later to the International Space Station. So commemorating all over the world this event, the Soviet stamp released commemorates the accomplishment there. Quite a to have Americans on a Soviet stamp was quite a thing back in the Soviet communist days. And what did they do up there? Each of the spacecraft took half of several things. And this was a very big deal that they took this plate up there. And of course the blue was the Americans took up and the red the Soviets, and they went into the tunnel or in each other's spacecraft and put them together up there. And these artifacts are now in all over the world as well as in the Smithsonian. And president at the time was Gerald Ford, who took over as vice president after the resignation of Richard Nixon. Quite a historic. And he talked to the cosmonaut astronaut team up in space. So that was even historic that the American president talked to them, as did, I believe, Leonid Brezhnev was the leader of the Soviet Union at that time. This is sort of cute. The decals and images and patches that came out of this were influenced by the Russian iconic bear image and our Snoopy, the mascot of safety, the mascot that Tom Stafford chose to be the name of his Apollo 10 moon mission, the dry run, so to speak, without the landing of Apollo 10. The lunar module was called Snoopy, the command module Charlie Brown. So they just called it Apollo because it was the only spacecraft up there So you didn't need to say Apollo. There was no number to it. It's just Apollo ASTP. And the Soyuz was Apollo. That was their Soyuz number 19, I believe was the name of that spacecraft. So there you are. The California Space Museum is the Apollo Soyuz Test Project command module in all of its glory there. I've never seen it. I wonder if Doug Forrest has, since he lives there. But it's 49-year-old spacecraft there. And these are slowly deteriorating by the elements, you better believe it. So occasionally they go through and have them restored. But that's why we have it as the background. Logan chose it as our background. And I said that suits me just fine, because this is an iconic spacecraft that's 6 years apart from the moon landing of Apollo 11 to the final mission of the Apollo Soyuz Test Project. Proved its reliability, worked flawlessly. The problem with Apollo 13 was in the service module attached to it. That's where the oxygen tank blew up. But this spacecraft being frozen in space for 3 days during that harrowing April 1971 Apollo 13, it's incredible how it worked flawlessly once they got back in there. The Apollo 13, and there were so many unknowns. Would it come on? Would there be short circuits because of moisture? Would the heat shield stand up? Was it cracked because of the explosion? But everything was just fine with this North American moon ship. So we celebrate the Apollo Soyuz Test Project. We're going to look at a little bit of our Space Walk of Fame, just 3 blocks from where I'm sitting here in our studios at the American Space Museum. Many of you have been there. Of course, when you visit, you want to go there. We have Alexei Leonov's handprints in bronze there, and we have Kubasov's. So I'll bet there's not too many places in the world where their handprints are, and you can go out there and see it today and put your hands on there. Here's the first international mission commemorated in all of its glory there. Typical, we have these things at the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and Space Shuttle sites there. And there's Tom Stafford's handprints with the space workers' names around them that gave us $100. There's Bill Linz, it looks like, and there's Tom Stafford. He died at age 94 about 4 months ago. He was here on the Space Coast, very active to the end. In fact, he was chairman of a committee on safety for the International Space Station until the day he died, with our astronaut friend Jim Adams was also on that committee. And I talked to Jim at a luncheon once a month and learned some of the kind of classified secret stuff that I'm not going to say on air, but the relationships with Russia and America have always been fine on the International Space Station. They all go to their separate sections and do their work. They all come together at dinner time and swap stories and just have good camaraderie, just like humans all over the world. Once we take off of these flags off our side of our patches and side of our vehicles and so forth, everybody gets along just fine in space. There's Mr. Vance Brand, his handprints there. You got Harry Harrison, worked for Boeing, and there's Irving Walden, Bendix, and John Stiles, NASA KSC, Jerry Pruitt, Rockwell International, so maybe he worked on this. Sid Hodge, don't know any of them, Marty. And I look at these names and see yours up there, and I'm just going, look at all these other people that were part of this. It's just incredible. And the pride they have in it, just as much as Marty when he worked with Grumman and then later with the United Space Alliance on the shuttle engines. So there's Vance in space there. Let me tell you a little bit about Vance Brand. Born in Los Angeles. No, he's born in, where's my notes on? Colorado. Longmont, Colorado. Was very loyal to his Colorado roots. University of California. He was chosen as an astronaut in 1966. Okay, there's Vance there. Thought I had another picture in there. I guess that didn't rack up. Okay. I had a picture of him on Apollo Soyuz Test Project. I mean, he did, after this, he commanded 3 space shuttle missions, including the first fully operational flight of the space shuttle, STS-5, which I thought I threw in there, but this is Vance in the tunnel of the Apollo Soyuz Test Project. He commanded 3 shuttle flights. 41B was his second flight, where Bruce McCandless did the untethered walk, spacewalk on the manned maneuvering unit, and then STS-35 in 1990. So Brandt first went to space in 1975, and then 15 years later went to space on his last mission. How cool is that? That was an Astro 1 mission that he commanded on there. So, very philanthropic guy. Here he is in late life. I've told the story many times where he came in to see some artifacts he donated to us. The docent didn't recognize him. He was in the museum about 20 minutes, left a note for our executive director, Karan, Conklin, saying everything looked great. He even paid his $8 senior citizen fee to come in here to the museum. So we've never been able to nail Vance down, though, to come on our Stay Curious program. And at age 93, not sure, he's in pretty good health, the last report I got from him. So spent 31 days in space. And, of course, the Apollo Soyuz Test Project, his rookie flight, almost cost him his life. Okay. Why is that, you say? Well, let's tell that story right now about the landing of the Apollo Soyuz Test Project. Have I got the slide in here for it? That was a lot earlier. I showed that, didn't I? Yeah. It was considered ASPT, as it's known as, Apollo Soyuz Test Project, was a great success technologically and public relations around the world. The only serious problem was during reentry and splashdown. And I heard this story twice from General Stafford telling this story. So this is straight from him. When they landed, a vent was accidentally opened up, and the crew was exposed to monolethyl hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide fumes. All right, caused by the reaction control system, hypergolic fuels. Those are the hypergolic fuels, the reaction control system. They vented into the spacecraft, supposed to go outside, but it re-entered through a cabin air intake. All right, left inadvertently open. Toxic fumes were sucked into them as they were on the ocean there, as they were going down. Brandt briefly lost consciousness while Stafford retrieved oxygen masks and put one on on Vance, and gave one to Slayton. All right. And the general said they were upside down. Their harnesses were holding them, so he had to, upside down. So he had to unbuckle the harness, which made him collapse into the bottom of the point there of the Apollo command module, which he said was a good thing because that's where the masks were. So he grabbed the mask, threw one to Deke, and put one around Vance, who had passed out. All right. Now, we see them walking on the ship after the recovery and so forth. But did you know the 3 astronauts were hospitalized for 2 weeks in Honolulu, Hawaii? All right. That took them that long for their lungs to recover from these hypergolic fuels that those of you like Marty that are very familiar with them know that was a close call, right, Marty? They could have died easily from this. What a tragedy that would have been on the final flight of an Apollo spacecraft. Vance Brand took responsibility for the mishap because of the high noise levels in the cabin during reentry. He believes he was unable to hear Stafford call out one item on the reentry checklist, the closure of the 2 switches, which would have shut off the RCS and begun drug chute employment. These procedures were manually performed later than usual. All right, having the fumes ingested into the spacecraft there. So if you didn't know that, it was a close call, all right, for them in there. But they survived it, and like I said, spent 2 weeks in the hospital in Honolulu before they went home to their families. So now you know. Now you're staying curious. So All right, we got Vance there, and a little bit about Deke Slayton. Uh, uh, to tell you first, just a few things about Tom Stafford. I didn't do that when we had his picture up there. Born in Weatherford, Oklahoma, he has one of the most fabulous private museums you'll ever want to be at. I've been to it 4 times and need to go back again. Of course, this was his 4th and last flight. Twice as a member of Gemini. He was Gemini 6A with Wally Schirra, called the A because of the aborted liftoff, and then he was the backup of Apollo 9, and when Elliot C. and Charles Bassett were killed in a plane crash, he became the backup for that 9A mission with Gene Cernan. So he quickly became the commander of a mission, and then was the commander of Apollo 10 that did the barnstorming of the moon, everything but landing on the moon, to find out that would everything work in lunar gravity for Apollo 11. So what a great guy, always willing to talk to you about things, Tom Stafford. But little is known about Deke Slayton. Let me go here. There, or my image. There we go. There's Deke Slayton. Was an Apollo. He was a Mercury astronaut. One of the 7 original Mercury astronauts chosen in 1959. So he's chosen, training in 60. He waited 15 years to fly. But why didn't he fly? He was grounded because of a heart murmur. Heart palpitations were found. And so he wasn't going to fly, and he became the chief of the astronaut office, wielding great power with the other Mercury astronaut that was grounded after his suborbital flight, Alan Shepard. All right. Alan Shepard was grounded because he had an imbalanced Meniere's disease. He got that medically, surgically fixed, was fine, and then put himself on as commander of Apollo 14. It was actually Apollo 13 and needed more training, so he switched with the Apollo 14 crew that became Apollo 13. And you know what? Alan Shepard did the most pinpoint landing on the moon on Apollo 14 with rookie Edgar Mitchell. And both were great friends of our museum. But back to Slayton. Slayton was born in Sparta, Wisconsin. And Sparta, Wisconsin does honor their favorite son there. Donald Deke Slayton. Donald Kent Slayton was born March 1st, 1924. He died in 1993 of a brain hemorrhage at age 69. Way too young. All right. And throughout his childhood, his family did not have electricity or indoor plumbing. At age 5, he was clearing a horse-drawn hay mower when his left finger was severed. Have I got a picture of that on here? I think. Why didn't I put that in? Oh, yeah, I do. I have a picture of that, which blew my mind when I saw it. There's Deke. Of course, he became a key figure of the Gemini and then the Apollo moon landings, wearing, there's his his Mercury picture, I mean. There's his handprints out at the Mercury Monument. And when I saw it for the first time, I'm going, here, I can put my hands right there. I'm going, wait a minute. He's missing a finger on his left hand, by golly. And certainly he did. Now you're going to see every picture of Deke. You're going to notice he's got that left hand lots of times in his pants or in his jacket pocket. Doesn't expose it. I've never seen a picture of him exposing it. How in the world did he become an astronaut? Missing a finger, Marty and Logan. You'd think that would immediately disqualify him for that. As it turns out, they had to have counted all of his fingers in the physical tests and stuff. But that's one of the least used fingers of the human of all humans. Your 2 ring fingers don't do much unless you type a lot. Okay, so he got through being an astronaut, missing a finger. How about that? For y'all staying curious out there. And there it is again out at the Apollo Soyuz Test Project there. I just think it's so interesting there. So how did he get to be an astronaut with a heart murmur? Well, glad you asked. There's a late picture of him as an aviator. He took great measures to be restored to flight status, including exercising, taking vitamins. He quit smoking cigarettes and quit drinking coffee and reduced his consumption of alcoholic beverages. All right. And in so his palpitations that didn't work. So he started taking daily doses of quinidine, a crystalline alkaloid. This treatment was successful, but concerned that taking medications would disqualify him from flying solo, his passion to fly, of course, of any aircraft, he stopped taking it against doctors' orders. He saw doctors around the world, and he was finally examined in 1971 at the Mayo Clinic after a long period without heart fibrillation, and was determined to not have a coronary condition in 1971. So he returned to flight status in 1972. Now, I didn't know he returned to flight status in 72. In March, we had the April Apollo 16 and then December Apollo 17 of the final program. So he didn't put himself on either three of the flights of Skylab. But with the last flight that he could possibly be on, he assigned himself to it there. Here's Slayton in familiar garb, the turtleneck, kind of half turtleneck, shirt. Look at his physique there, his abs sticking out there, Marty. He's talking to the press on Apollo 11 there. And this, he would be in the flight room lots of times with this half turtleneck on there. And does that look familiar to you, Marty? Haven't seen the movie Fly Me to the Moon, the star of that.
Well, that was, I've been there before. That's where they exit the O&C building.
Right, you've been there many times. I don't know who the muckety-mucks are waiting around there for him. None of them look familiar to me. But there's Slayton in the Apollo 11 moon landing moment, wearing that mock turtleneck with Charlie Duke there beside him there. Now, the Capcom on Apollo 11, Charlie Duke was Capcom, and so was Bruce McCandless. Bruce McCandless's voice is heard a lot on the Apollo 11. He was the key Capcom during the EVAs, all right? Let's talk about Bruce McCandless just a minute. Did I put a picture of Bruce in here? No, I didn't. But this spurs a Bruce McCandless story about Deke Slayton. So Deke Slayton, supposedly, I read in a book, about an hour into the 2-hour spacewalk on July 20th, 1969, that we're watching live on TV, Deke Slayton went over to Bruce McCandless and said, tell him to wrap it up. Tell him to start wrapping it up. And McCandless looked at Deke, and I don't know what he said, but he did not relay that information to the astronauts on the moon surface. Hey, Deke says start wrapping it up. Now here's Deke Slayton, who is always training as an astronaut because he wanted to make sure that, you know, if he would get cleared that he could fly. So he knows these astronauts very well. Buzz and Neil on the moon, they're in spacesuits that have never been tested before. They're a little bit, everyone's nervous about that here on Earth, but Buzz and Neil just said they worked just fabulous. So Deke goes over there to tell McCandless, hey, tell him to wrap it up a little bit early. All right, I'm nervous. Well, McCandless never relayed that message because they had a flight plan. They knew what they were supposed to do every minute on the moon. But you know what? McCandless didn't fly for another 15 years on there. And Deke did go back to the office and be the chief of the astronaut office for a while. Did he hold a grudge against him or not? I don't know, but there's some insinuation in that. I was told by some NASA VIPs that no, Deke didn't have the power to do that to McCandless. McCandless was working on the manned maneuvering unit in 1969, though it didn't fly until 1983. So they felt that, like, some of these VIPs and other NASA people I talked to about this incident said, no, they don't think it was vindictive, but you can judge for yourself there. Because when Deke spoke, you did something there. Well, there he is at the press conference of the Apollo 11 guys, talking to one of the just hundreds of interviews they did. And when they went on that world tour, that's right, Deke was right there with them off camera. So Doug Forrest says he's photographed every inch of the ASTPCM. All right. So we're waiting for those photographs, Doug. And Steve Jokums has had the privilege of seeing it. He thinks it's going to get moved over to the new Ocean, Air, and Space Center for a while. And Mitch says that the airport in Longmont, California is indeed named for Vance Brandt on there. So William Whiting sending hugs to Karan. So I'll hug her for you when I see her. A scene of Apollo 11 as we go back and forth between 11 and ASTP. Look at how technology was in 1969. Okay, they're looking like I am on a screen in front of me here, Marty, to see what they're doing on a monitor there in the front. We want to give a shout out to Sparta, Wisconsin, and their bicycle museum that has a homage to Slayton in it. In fact, they're very active. There's a statue of Slayton up there, and on the second floor apparently is a facility with his stuff, and they have periodically a $10 join us on Zoom. They had Jerry Griffin on there last Sunday to talk about his involvement with the Apollo and Apollo Soyuz Test Project. Jerry Griffin, of course, a flight director. And did you know that Deke was involved with the Conestoga wagon? Not the kind that you think about went across the country, but he was involved and sunk some of his name and recognition into the Conestoga. Was successfully launched in 1982, the world's first privately funded rocket to reach space. It took a payload of 40 gallons of water, which was ejected at about 150 miles up. But like so many of the new programs, once you're first, it doesn't always mean you're sustainable on that. So that's kind of a sad thing. There's Deke Slayton's driver's license, okay, that I think we sold at an auction. Somebody had on there. Where did he get the name Deke? But when he was a test pilot, there were 2 test pilots in his squadron named Don. So he was Don for years, all right. But in order to avoid communication and radio communications, Slayton said, I'll go by my initials DK, okay, which were shortened later, his 2 initials, Kenneth, shortened to Deke. DK shortened to Deke. And, of course, flashy hotshot Mercury astronaut don't mind having a little nickname like that. And he was honored as a Cygnus supply mission launched by Orbital ATK at the time, now Northrop Grumman, went up to Expedition 45. And this is what when they opened it up, they said they saw Deke's Apollo Soyuz Test Project photograph there. And we're up to Expedition 71 now up there. And I'll bet Mark Usiak photographed that launch out there at the missile range on Virginia. Marty, what's the name of the... Yeah, senior moment here. Wallops. Wallops. I'll do a Wallops there. Like Bob Newhart stuttering there. So, but I'll bet you Marky got a good shot of that cargo ship going up there. Named after Deke, as they so often do. And what come out of that 49 years ago? Quite frankly, a whole lot of great relations, though we had some great relations after Apollo 11. Like I said, Apollo Soyuz Test Project is sustained today with the cooperation at the International Space Station of 17 countries, including Russia, a valid partner in there. This is taken off STS 71, I think, patch there. And the Soyuz, the Mir shuttle years that began in 95 is when they began. That's why we're going to celebrate that was 1996 when the Apollo, the relationships with Russia and the Mir space station began in 1996. So we'll be celebrating that at a future Shuttle Fest. And there's, wow, I can't believe we got such a low res picture there. There is Expedition 71 on space right now. All right, 3 Russians, 6 Americans up there enjoying a big time. There's the Russian Konyenko, the most experienced man in space with over 1,000, coming up on 1,100 days in space there. So we're going to be getting him back, and with right behind is Tracy Dyson and another Russian in September when the Space Dragon 8 crew comes back. And there's the picture I put at the end. I knew I had a picture up there somewhere of the great Vance Brand, 93 years old. Hope you're doing well. That's the first certified mission of the what the shuttle was intended to be, a space truck, and STS-5 was all that. And there's Vance Brand and his crewmates up there. Thank you, Logan, for handing me the list of guests here. I've said hi to almost all of them there, and glad that you're all watching today, and thank you for your comments. And we've got a good week lined up for you, as we've got coming in, and I'm going to put tomorrow, you're not going to want to miss. God bless Karan there, and I'm glad that you're all thinking of her, and Dr. Kohler's free book. And we're going to have a show on, hopefully by the end of the week, if we can patch it up with Winston Scott and Roger Crouch. But we're going to be excited to see a leader of the space industry. James Hines is anxious to talk to us here and tell his OneWeb story of how OneWeb became Airbus and is so important to our national security. And you're not going to want to miss that tomorrow, as our staff here is working hard to get you good interviews and good programs every day to stay curious. So, Logan, thank you for a great job today. And Marty, thank you for being here as always. And I thank you all for watching. And until next time, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us. Thank you so much.